Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is Time-Crossed Lovers in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 36, Fishing and Fighting. When Ash returned to the table, he was looking at her nervously. Byleth should at least try to put him more at ease. You did not answer Dida's question earlier. Ash looked at her, startled. How was your scouting mission? Did anything of note happen? Ash's eyes widen. Not really, no, which I suppose is a good thing. We looked into some routes that His Majesty sent us questions about and found nothing remiss. That is good. King Dimitri wanted to make sure Lady Byleth's information was still accurate, said Dida. He will be pleased that our ideas could still work. Byleth nodded in agreement. She had been worried that her recommendations might not be good anymore. It had been a while since she was in the area after all. You made the route recommendations? Ash said in surprise. How did you know about them? I am familiar with the area, though it has been a while. King Dimitri wanted to take advantage of my knowledge. Byleth shrugged. The only issue was we couldn't decide if a short route to Anbar that offered the army fewer natural resources to take advantage of was the ideal choice, or if a longer route with more resources was better. They had been discussing the nuances for quite a while. She is relieved the choice is not up to her. That is an issue. Ash looked down at his meal thoughtfully. How long has it been since you've been in the area? Byleth tilted her head to the side. I think it may have been a little before we were recruited into your army. With some parts of the routes, though, it has been much longer. She did spend almost half a year after traveling the roads in Leicester with Dimitri, so it is difficult to pin down dates. That was so long ago, how could you remember everything? Byleth put down her spoon. I'm a mercenary, being observant is important. Maps aren't always accessible, so we need to remember all we can when we travel for work. This isn't so different. Ash nodded his head. If I may ask, how long have you been a mercenary? I've been with Geralt's mercenaries my whole life, but was only allowed to join them for work when I was around 12. She thinks Geralt didn't exactly keep up with marking her birthday. Prior to that, her father would pay a tavern owner or innkeeper to watch her while he was fighting bandits or whatnot. Why would your father bring you with him? Ash's attention was completely focused on her. Couldn't he have left you at home or with family? Byleth shook her head. It's always only been me and Geralt. He became a mercenary in the first place to provide for us. Besides, I like the life I've been living. The Blade Breaker was a captain in the Knights of Syros, right? Why did he leave Garreg Mach anyway? Oh, that is a tricky question. We are both fools to have not considered how to answer these kinds of inquiries. Byleth isn't so sure. She only knows the correct answer because of redoing her life and the conversations the two of them have had. Her father hasn't actually told her anything. She should probably just pretend to be ignorant. I am not sure. Until we were hired by the Imperial Army, I wasn't even aware Geralt was once a member of the Knights of Syros. Byleth sighed. He doesn't like talking about the past too much. That is odd. He must have seen so much and helped so many people. It's strange that he wouldn't talk about it. Considering he lost his wife and feared for your safety, I cannot fault him for not wishing to discuss his past as a general rule. Not talking to you about it is another story, though. We still help people as mercenaries, maybe even more so since anyone could acquire our services, not just those the church deems worthy. Byleth had almost forgotten how those from Firgus tended to have a negative view of mercenaries. Not that that stopped the nobility from trying to hire them anyway. My father just prefers to live in the present. I'm sure there are aspects of your own past you avoid talking about. Ash jolted in his seat. That is true. I suppose there are things we would all rather move on from. Byleth was pretty much done eating, as was Dida. Should she excuse herself? Things were pleasant at the moment, but she did not want to overstay her welcome. Wait until everyone is done eating. One of your dining companions might wish to continue to talk, Suthis suggested. If not, you can simply leave and we'll come off as polite. It was worth a shot. Her father had been sent out on his own scouting mission, so it's not like she has anything better to do. Say, Miss Eisner, were there any particularly interesting jobs you took before the war started? Even Dida looked interested. It couldn't hurt to share a couple of stories. There were a few, and you can call me Byleth if you'd like. Dimitri wanted to be true to his word with Byleth. He would not push, only set up situations to encourage the former Officers' Academy students to spend time with her. The only issue was that he was struggling to figure out situations to bring about those interactions. He'd heard from Dida that Ash had joined them at lunch after he left. Their friend had apparently been fascinated by some of Byleth's exploits as a mercenary. That was an excellent start. If nothing else, Ash would at the very least not outright avoid Byleth anymore. He could see her as a person now, and not the ghost or whatever it was he and Annette thought her to be when he overheard them by the supplies. Now he just needed to figure out what to do about the others. Dimitri had already planted the seeds with Felix. Byleth honestly was the best swordsman he'd ever seen, that wasn't a lie. It really was only a matter of time before Felix gave in and challenged her to a spar. Hopefully Byleth wouldn't refuse to go along with it. Dimitri knows she promised to try, but Felix wasn't always the most tactful. Depending on how he asked and when he did it, she could still say no. The others are a bit more complicated, and that doesn't even begin to cover the other former Officers' Academy students. Dimitri doesn't know them very well, so he couldn't even begin to figure out how to help Byleth there. Perhaps once the former Blue Lions have more positive opinions of his beloved, they might have ideas. He might not have interacted much with many of the Golden Deer and Black Eagles in a social capacity, but they did. It was a start at any rate. This was more work than he was expecting, but Byleth was worth it. She deserved to be happy, and Dimitri would do everything in his power to help her regain what she had lost. We sparred most mornings while in Ferdiad. I don't see why we can't continue that tradition. Dimitri had gotten up early to catch Byleth after she went to get breakfast. We don't have to, of course, but I would very much prefer if we did. We only did that because we weren't here, said Byleth as she walked along. You have other options now. I'm not the only person who can actually pose a challenge anymore. Dimitri sped up to keep stride with her. I am aware, but you've always been my preferred sparring partner. I know we have to be a little more careful now, but I think it would be best to continue to try and spend time together. They'd never get anywhere otherwise. Byleth paused. I suppose that makes sense, but I still can't spar with you today. She then began to walk again. He rushed to catch up to her. Why? Has something happened? No, it's just I'm sparring with Geralt this morning and I need to be fresh for that. Oh, that makes sense. Dimitri smiled. I was not aware of that. If it would not bother you, perhaps I could join the two of you. I know you sparred with each other for hours yesterday, maybe having another person there could be beneficial. I'm not sure. Byleth looked at him for a moment. But if you show up after we start, I will not attempt to make you leave. That was more than he was expecting. Then I just might be found in the training grounds later. Spending time with his beloved and her father was a great way to pass the morning as far as he was concerned. So, Byleth began, what does the rest of your day look like? As always, his day was packed. There are some stacks of paperwork I have to go through and a strategy meeting I need to lead this evening. We will be using the information you provided to decide our next move. Byleth nodded. We'll be leaving for Inber soon. Yes, Dimitri agreed. Not too long from now this war will end, one way or another. He still needed to figure out what to do about Edelgard. Byleth shot him a concerned look. Is that all you will be doing today? Paperwork, strategy meetings, and possibly crashing my sparring time with Geralt. Dimitri chuckled. No, your father actually requested, more like insisted that he continue my fishing lessons. He shook his head. I didn't get the impression I had much of a choice, not that I mind. Dimitri truly enjoyed those lessons with Geralt. He hoped to eventually spend time fishing with Byleth. That would not happen for a while though. Dimitri wanted to wait until he was confident he would not break anything. It was a small miracle he hadn't snapped the fishing rod yet. Though he did regularly break fishing lines and hooks. That sounds like my father. Dimitri lets Byleth go ahead of him, she deserves some time alone with her father. While he is slowly making his way to the training area he almost walks into Felix. What's with that goofy grin on your face? It's even more unnerving than the one you wear when we go into battle. Dmitri laughs, which just makes Felix scowl harder. Captain Geralt and Byleth are sparring this morning. I am hoping to get a chance to join them. Not only are they two of the most skilled combatants he's ever seen, but he genuinely enjoys spending time with them both. Byleth is his beloved, so that goes without saying, and Geralt, for all that his is a silent and gruff man, is a very kind soul beneath it all. Though I suppose just watching them would be acceptable as well, Dmitri mused. I could probably learn a lot from just that. Why would the Ashen Demon tell you about her plans? That was an odd question. I asked her. Is there something wrong with that? I thought she was trying to avoid you. Why would she just tell you where she was going? Felix was glaring at him. Is this why your head's been in the clouds lately? Your girlfriend is talking to you again. Dmitri frantically looks around before stepping closer to Felix. Please keep your voice down, Byleth has only recently agreed to work with me. If rumors spread around the camp, it could make her step back again. Byleth would probably not like being referred to as his girlfriend either. Their relationship was in a gray area right now, and rumors of that kind of label on them might bring some of their former tension back. Felix scoffed. Stop being so jumpy, it's pathetic. He began to walk away. Get your act together or she'll probably start avoiding you again. I don't want to deal with your moping when that inevitably happens. Would you like to join me, Felix? This might be a good chance to get Felix to spend time with Byleth. He loved sparring after all. If we ask, I am certain Captain Geralt and Byleth would not object to us joining them. I'm sure you could get a lot out of sparring with a swordsman of Byleth's caliber. Felix looks thoughtful for a moment before turning back. I suppose, but I'm leaving if you're wrong. Dmitri can feel his smile widening. Hopefully this, like her lunch with Ash and Dedue, will go well. Byleth was fully expecting Dmitri to eventually make his way to where she and Geralt were sparring. He had told her he would. What did surprise her was that Felix was with him. She and Geralt were taking a short break when they arrived. Hello, would you mind if we joined you? Dmitri looks excited. Geralt looks at her, and when she doesn't say anything, he turns back to Dmitri and Felix. Sure, I don't see a problem with that. Geralt stood up and grabbed his lance. Just because you're our employers doesn't mean we'll go easy on you though. Her father did not like them training with practice weapons. He only really used them when one of them was already injured or they were just starting to learn something new. Byleth preferred that as well, but when in Fhirdiad she made exceptions because she didn't want to cause an uproar and risk rumors that she was actually trying to assassinate the king. That works for me. Felix entered the training grounds and grabbed a sword from one of the racks, with Dmitri following soon after. I've always found it odd that so many insisted we use practice weapons while in Fhirdiad. That made sense. Before everything happened, she and Dmitri would typically use real weapons while training in Garreg Mach. Maybe this wouldn't be too bad. At the very least she could help Felix with his form. He wasn't as good as he was before, and it might be nice to help him get to the place she remembers him being. If he lets her, that is. Felix is prickly, so it could go either way, but she did promise Dmitri to try. Things were steadily improving as far as Dmitri could tell. He and Byleth had continued to spar together most mornings and would regularly share a meal. Most heartening was that Ash and Felix, like Dedue before them, were now actively spending time with Byleth. Felix, who had been stupefied when Byleth quickly defeated him during their first spar, now regularly challenged her to more of them. He even readily took any advice she gave, barely grumbling at all to her critiques. That just leaves Mercedes, Annette, Ingrid, and Sylvain from the Blue Lions. He can only hope that once the other former Officers' Academy students see them getting along with Byleth, they will follow suit. Dmitri just needs to figure out what to do next. Byleth was trying but did not seem comfortable creating situations for herself. He supposes that made sense. She has no experience with doing that kind of thing and already feels isolated from the people she was once close with. Byleth already felt rejected. Dmitri cannot blame her for not wanting to make the first move. Kid, keep an eye on your line. Dmitri looked back at the water and saw his line moving. A fish must have taken his bait. Acting quickly, Dmitri reeled in his catch. It did not take long for him to grab a decently sized fish from the water. That's a good one. Gerald came over to examine his catch. The size is good, and it looks healthy. Captain Gerald kept insisting on continuing his fishing lessons. Dmitri had no complaints. In fact, he enjoyed the experience. Most of the time Alois joined them, which led to many awful jokes that both he and Gerald found hilarious. Occasionally, Rodrigue would join them as well. Byleth had not taken part as of yet, but he is fine with that. Not that she was around anyway. Ash was sent on one last scouting mission before they made definite plans to move out and had asked Byleth to accompany him. Now what would you like to do with it? Gerald asked. That was a good question. Occasionally they cooked and ate their catches by the water, but he would usually take his to the kitchens where it could be put to better use than filling his stomach. Perhaps we could cook it and have it ready for Byleth when she gets back. She never gets to eat her fill from what the kitchens make, and she's been gone for most of the day. There's very little he actually gets to do for her, and considering how much Byleth loves eating, this could make her very happy. Dmitri always loved watching her eat. She always looked so delighted while doing so. My kid would like that, and since we had so much luck today, we can have a decent number of fish ready by the time she gets here. Gerald gestured to his own bucket of fish. He and Alois had caught much more than Dmitri had. Let's get these gutted and cleaned, the sun should be going down soon. We should get started then, Alois added. We wouldn't want anyone to look over and expect us of doing something fishy now, would we? Dmitri could not wait. He was not a good cook by any means. It was difficult when one couldn't taste anything, but Gerald and Alois knew what they were doing. Byleth was sure to be pleased when she got back. Chapter 37, Fish Cookout. Byleth stretches after dismounting from her horse. She had been riding for a while and just wanted to go find dinner. Is that all you care about, filling your stomach? Suthies chastised. You've been daydreaming about fish since we started heading back. Byleth knows for a fact that Suthies likes how fish tastes as well. Irrelevant. As Byleth is removing her horse's saddle, she spots Dmitri approaching her. He looked oddly happy. He usually looks happy when they are together, but it looks different from normal. What could have put such a skip in his step? They are bound to find out soon. Byleth, Dmitri said excitedly. If you do not have any immediate plans, I would very much like it if you would come with me. What could he be planning? All right. She might as well get it over with. Hopefully whatever Dmitri was after could be dealt with quickly. Byleth really wants to eat. We are almost there, Byleth. Dmitri seemed very pleased with himself as he led the way. I promise, you will enjoy what I have to show you. Byleth was skeptical. His history with that kind of thing was hit or miss at this point, with an emphasis on the miss. Byleth knows Dmitri always means well, but that doesn't change the fact that his attempts to bring them together had a tendency to annoy her at best. He seemed really excited though, so she chose not to say anything. That's probably for the best. The sooner we get this over with, the sooner we can leave. Maybe that's not fair though. Dmitri had been better lately, and he had been working with her, not around her. They had also been on horseback most of the day, without a break. Byleth knows she is tired and hungry. They should be careful not to let that color their reactions to Dmitri. I suppose, Suthies huffed. Still, we had a long day. Hopefully the boy will respect that and allow us to get some rest instead of attempting to steal you away for some effort at romance or what have you. Byleth cannot help but agree. She just wants to eat and lie down. It takes all of Dmitri's willpower to not offer his arm or take Byleth's hand. That would attract too much attention and upset Byleth though. That's fine. The surprise he's leading her to will be more than enough. It does not take them long to get near the lake, and more importantly the smells emanating from the cooking fires. As soon as they get close enough, a quick glance allows him to see his beloved's face go from suspicious to intrigued. Once they catch sight of her father, she is practically radiating excitement. Food. And then she is gone from his side. Dmitri doesn't mind though. Byleth has always been a voracious eater, and after her long day, she must be famished. While it would have been nice to remain physically close to her, the real joy is watching her happiness at the imminent meal. Dimitri made his way over to the campfire and watched as Captain Gerald put the cooked fish in front of Byleth. The kid over there caught this one. Gerald gestured in his direction and Dimitri could feel himself flush. There are plenty more though, we caught a lot today. Byleth looks at him curiously, before turning back to the fish. Thank you, it looks good. Your father has me here almost every day practicing. Dimitri desperately hopes the fish tastes good. I'm happy to share the fruits of my labor with you. He grabs himself a smaller fish. It smells good, and that's the most he can hope for. Dimitri is more focused on watching Byleth practically inhaling the fish. She even had a small smile on her face. It does not take long for everyone to have their own fish. It's been a while since we've done this, said Gerald. We mostly get our food from the mess hall. We've been getting spoiled lately. There are worse things than relying on someone else for good food, Byleth responded. She looked to be on her third plate. The fish you caught tasted really good, Dimitri. He felt elated. I am happy to hear you enjoyed it so much. Hey now, I caught the others you are eating. Gerald clapped a hand on his daughter's shoulder. Where's my praise? You always catch tasty fish, why would that be noteworthy? Eloise belted out a laugh. She has you there, Captain. The other mercenaries began laughing at their captain's expense as well. It was nice to be surrounded by such warmth. What's going on here? Dimitri jolted and looked back towards the camp to find Ingrid glaring at them all. Did you get permission to do this? She began approaching them. We have a kitchen, you don't need to start fires like that. Well, the king is here. Gerald shrugged. I figured that was permission enough. Ingrid jerked into a stop when she saw him sitting with the mercenaries. Your Majesty, what are you doing here? Eating dinner. Dimitri has no idea where her confusion is coming from. It's not like he kept his association with them a secret. Rodrigue joined them in their fishing lessons often enough. I can see that, Ingrid said tensely. What I meant was, why are you eating dinner here? I am sure there are more suitable meals you could be having. Suitable meals? Was she trying to imply that his choice of dinner was unsuitable, or was it his choice of where to eat? Dimitri had a feeling it was the latter. He did not care for that. The mercenaries were far from bad people and Dimitri enjoyed spending time with them. We caught plenty of fish today. Some of it was taken to the kitchens, of course. Ingrid finally got close enough to smell the food, but it seemed a shame not to enjoy it here. He could practically see her mouth beginning to water at the delicious smell. Just a little push more, and he'd have her. Ingrid was almost as big of a glutton as Byleth. You caught. You didn't know. Dimitri hadn't been hiding his time amongst the mercenaries. Captain Gerald has been teaching me to fish. Ingrid came to a halt beside him. I knew you and Lord Rodrigue were spending time here, but I did not expect this. Dimitri glanced at Byleth and saw that she had put her plate down, a plate that still had food on it, and was looking away. Ingrid, would you like to join us? His beloved shouldn't feel uncomfortable right now, they had been having such a lovely time. There should be more than enough food to go around, even with you and Byleth here. Byleth. Dimitri couldn't stop the smile from spreading across his face. Byleth eats even more than you do. He loved watching her eat, it was typically when his beloved was the happiest. Really? Ingrid looked at Byleth in surprise. Byleth, in turn, gestured to the stack of plates at her side. The fish is fresh, and it tastes good. She then held out a plate. Ingrid looked conflicted for a moment before taking the plate and sitting next to him. Dimitri had to move a little farther away from Byleth to make room, but that was fine. This was the first time Ingrid had decided to spend any leisure time with Byleth. It did not take long for Ingrid to begin happily munching on the offered fish. This did not surprise Byleth in the slightest. Ingrid loved food almost as much as she did after all. It was odd sitting so close to the other woman after everything, but Byleth tried not to let it get to her. Things had been going pretty well with Didu, Ash, and Felix, so she had no reason to think things would end horribly with Ingrid. It is good that things have been going so well. After how difficult things were previously, I am happy that you are feeling better. It was a relief. Things had actually been going better than Byleth had expected. It was honestly a little disconcerting. Things never went this easily for her. Don't get too pessimistic now, Suthies chided. Things have been going well because you and the boy are actually working together. You are no longer refusing to try, and he isn't enacting plans without thought. Most of your previous issues stemmed from the fact that the boy went barreling forward without consulting you, and therefore without anticipating all the potential consequences. Like usual, Suthies was right. Byleth still did not think things would work out the way Dimitri desired, she's not even sure she wants them to. However, refusing to do anything hadn't done her any favors. You see? You should listen to me more often. Probably. Things are quiet for a little while as everyone, even Dimitri, enjoys the food. It does not take long for the silence to break. I've been wondering, said Dimitri, if the war wasn't happening and people weren't clearly in need of skilled mercenaries, how would you find jobs? What was he trying to do? Dimitri knew how they typically found work, he watched her find jobs when they were in Leicester. Towards the end, he even found them jobs as well. Gerald put down his plate and looked at the sky thoughtfully. Well, we usually go to populated places and see who needs help. Depending on where we are, the pay isn't always great, but I'd prefer bad pay over a shady job any day. Like that one near the Rhodos coast. Gerald groaned. That was an experience to say the least. What happened? That was the first thing Ingrid said since she started eating. Some rich merchant hired us to guard some of his wares. Gerald shook his head. I can't even remember the guy's name. Anyway, it turned out his goods were actually the property of the locals. He'd apparently stolen it all and really just wanted us to scare everyone else off. Dimitri looks intrigued. Byleth is reasonably certain she told him a little of this story when they were dealing with their own detestable rich merchant. That's horrible. Ingrid looked furious. Gerald nodded in agreement. Yup, didn't take us long to figure out what was going on either. We gave the items back and scared off the merchant when he came to confront us. We didn't get paid after that, but the down payment for accepting the job got us a couple of days in a local inn. The inn hadn't been the nicest, but Byleth remembers being able to walk to the ocean with ease from it. They had caught a lot of fish during that time. Why is it always about food with you? How did the locals react to everything? Dimitri asked. They were thankful, of course, but none of them were very well off, so they couldn't reward us or anything if that's what you're asking. Gerald shrugged. Whenever we are in the area, they usually make it a point to give us food and lodging though, so I can't complain. Ingrid looked interested. Is that common? I thought mercenaries primarily cared about their paycheck. We need to eat and sleeping outside isn't always ideal, so of course the paycheck is important. Mercenary work is like any other job in that regard. Gerald gestured towards where Byleth is sitting. I started the work so I could provide for my kid, with the skills I had. We are not bandits though, we don't just attack people or anything. We find decent work and follow the client's instructions. Ingrid looked away in embarrassment. Have there been any other noteworthy jobs you took? Dimitri is giving Gerald his rapt attention. It doesn't really surprise Byleth that Dimitri is so interested. He's always been very invested in helping people. If he was a mercenary captain, Byleth imagines Dimitri would run things very similarly to how her father does. I'm not sure, Gerald trails off as he takes a swig from his flask. There was that job in Remire. Hopefully the village is still safe despite all the upheaval in the empire. The people there had always been good to them. Gerald nodded. That was a good one. What happened in Remire? Asked Eloise. This was a long time ago. Byleth was barely big enough to hold a sword, Gerald began. We were between jobs and traveling from place to place looking for prospective clients. Eventually, we stumbled upon Remire village. Byleth took another fish from the pile, she was still hungry. While doing so she caught Dimitri smiling at her again. She determinedly looked away, he should be paying more attention to her father and being more mindful of Ingrid's presence. It was pretty late when we got there, and the people were pretty distrustful when they noticed us setting up camp nearby. It was later that night that a group of bandits attacked. They'd been raiding the relatively poor village most nights. That is detestable. Eloise looks outraged and Ingrid nods in agreement. Her father shrugged. That kind of thing is not really all that uncommon. Anyway, we took care of them, though a good number of our tents and supplies got damaged or destroyed. The worst part though was turning around after the fight was over and not seeing my kid anywhere. Gerald looked at her. You nearly gave me a heart attack. Things worked out. It's not like she was hurt or anything. Where did you go? Dimitri looks worried, though Byleth isn't sure why. She clearly didn't sustain any lasting harm. His hands are gripping his plate so tightly that she's worried it might shatter. One of the bandits slipped by everyone else and snuck into the village. Following him seemed like a good idea at the time. The details are a little fuzzy, it did happen when she was very young. By the time I caught up to him, he'd found where the children had been hidden. There was a heavy rock or a box or something that I ended up dropping on him. Gerald found us before the bandit woke up. So, you've always been a reckless fool then. Though given how young you were, it was likely ignorance of the true danger as opposed to carelessness. Byleth has no argument against that. She can only imagine how much she has inadvertently scared her father. That had been the first time she had ever seen him so frantic. He'd insisted on literally carrying her around for days afterward. He claimed it was to better keep an eye on her, but even back then she knew he was still worried. Byleth hadn't overly minded. Geralt is a tall man, so the height had allowed her to see much farther than usual, and she enjoyed the easy access to his heartbeat. It was a very comforting sound. Suthies chuckled. Once I took care of that last bandit and got all the kids out of there, the rest of the villagers were very grateful. They went out of their way to give us food and help us repair our damaged things. They also liked Byleth much more than most people did, so we stuck around for a little while to make sure there would be no more bandit attacks. Ingrid looked confused. What do you mean, they liked Byleth more than most? I don't really make facial expressions and have a tendency to be blunt. The fact that she didn't really understand most emotions hadn't helped either. It typically made people uncomfortable, so people not being bothered by my presence was unusual. A guilty look overtakes Ingrid's face before the other girl looks away. I've never understood why you would get those kinds of reactions. Eloise nudged her shoulder. Sure, you're a little odd, but most people are in one way or another. Besides, personality-wise you're the spitting image of your father and no one has those kinds of issues with him. That is true. Most of the problems he causes are because he has an unpaid tab nearby, and he hasn't suckered someone into paying it for him. That had caused them to abandon prospective jobs before and avoid places altogether. It's probably not helped by the moniker I carry. The name Ashen Demon doesn't really inspire pleasant feelings. Geralt glared at the name. Neither of them had ever been a fan of it. I'm not even sure how that name stuck. I kept telling people not to call you that. I'm a mercenary, I was never going to be given a friendly name to go by. Byleth would have preferred something different, but the Ashen Demon was what stuck. The fact she didn't make facial expressions, even when fighting or killing, just egged people on. I am sorry, without my presence your life would have been very different. You could have had so much without me. Without Suthies there is every chance that she wouldn't have a life at all. Besides, the goddess was her dearest friend and Byleth wouldn't trade her for anything. Dimitri, thankfully, breaks through the somber mood by speaking again. Do you have any other stories? And just like that her father and Eloise begin regaling them with tales about their times in the Knights of Syros. Everyone had long since finished eating the fish and had broken up into smaller groups to continue talking and telling stories. Ingrid left but seemed much happier than when she arrived. Dimitri, meanwhile, chose to linger. He enjoyed listening to Captain Gerald talk and as people shuffled around, he found himself sitting next to his beloved and couldn't bring himself to stray from her side. Besides it wasn't even late yet. Byleth, Dimitri asked, would you like to head for the training grounds for a spar? After such a good meal, I could use some exercise. There is bound to be more paperwork for me to go through when I head back. Some activity will help him stay alert enough to not fall asleep while doing so. His beloved looks at him suspiciously for a moment. Okay. After all that food, I suppose I should get some activity in as well. With that they get up and walk away from the campfires. Dimitri hid his smile, this had been a wonderful evening. Everyone had enjoyed the food and company, and now he would get to spar with Byleth. For once Felix wouldn't be there to demand her attention either. Chapter 38, Making Friends. After their night eating and exchanging stories, Ingrid seemed more amicable towards Byleth. Dmitri had spotted them eating lunch together on multiple occasions. Now he just needs to figure out what to do about Sylvain, Annette, and Mercedes. Your Majesty, is everything all right? Ash was looking over at him in concern. They had been looking over a few maps and figuring out future scouting routes before Dimitri's mind had wandered. It's no wonder Ash was worried. Yes, everything is fine. I'm afraid I got distracted by a personal matter. It's nothing for you to be concerned about. At least Ash seems to like Byleth now. He, like Ingrid, frequently took meals with her and often asked Byleth to join him on scouting missions. Dmitri was happy that his beloved had more of her loved ones back in her life, different though it may be, but he did not feel like it was enough. She deserved everything, and that included regaining all friendships she had lost when they were forced to do over their lives. Having 4 people back was nothing. Is there anything I can do to be of assistance? Asked Ash. If it's related to the war, maybe I could. I thank you for the offer, but it is completely unrelated to the war efforts. Dmitri was grateful for the offer, but getting Ash's help with his current conundrum would likely require him to reveal more than either he or Byleth would like. I'm just stuck with a puzzle at the moment that I need to figure out. The context and backstory would be a bit much to go through now. Ash nodded thoughtfully. We are almost done here. Once we are finished, you could head to the kitchen. Mercedes, Annette, and Flane told me earlier they were going to be doing some baking today. Ash looked stricken for a moment. Don't worry though, Annette said she and Flane would mostly just be watching, so there shouldn't be any fires or food poisoning. Baked goods are comfort food. I'm sure if you ask, they'll give you some. Maybe the good food will help you think of something. That could work. They were making food and Byleth loved food. Given a little time, Dmitri could probably figure something out. Thank you, Ash, I think I'll do just that. Ash beamed at him. Thank you, Your Majesty, I am happy to help. As soon as they were finished, Dmitri heads straight for the kitchens. The obvious route to take would be to find Byleth and see if she'd like to join them in baking, but given Flane's presence he does not think it a wise idea. Perhaps if he tells Byleth about it, she might want to investigate and possibly get some of the baked sweets. It's probably best if he finds Byleth instead of going immediately to the kitchen. Dmitri turns around and heads in the direction of the training grounds. Felix has undoubtedly already challenged her to a spar. Byleth's morning had been rather slow. She'd gotten up early to fish with her father, and then Felix had shown up to ask her to spar. We did not get up early. Your father woke you up and told you to find him some bait. Again. Suthies huffed. You were digging in the dirt for over an hour to find enough worms. It wasn't so bad. Now Byleth just needed to figure out what to do with the rest of her day. Felix had left the training grounds in a huff not too long ago, grumbling about work. It was odd seeing him so used to being a duke and all that came with it. Before Shamhala he was still so new to the position and complained to her endlessly about all the non-sword related work. She's always told him he'd get the hang of it eventually, and Byleth is happy that she was correct. It was still a little sad though. Felix had come so far, all while she wasn't there to help him. Byleth. She looks in the direction of the shout and sees Dmitri running towards her. He is incredibly lucky no one else was in the training grounds with her. What do you want? Hopefully it won't be anything too crazy. He reaches the bench she is resting on and takes a seat beside her, placing his hand inches away from hers. I was talking with Ash earlier and he told me that Mercedes, Flane, and Annette are doing some baking today. As things have been going so well with the others lately, I thought this might be a good opportunity to give Annette and Mercedes a chance to get to know you. He rubs the back of his neck. Flane's presence is an issue though. That is true. Flane was a very nice girl and Byleth does miss her, but she is too connected to the church. Flane was also a Nabatean. She was sure to recognize, or at least suspect, that Byleth herself bared some of their hallmark features. If that happened, she would tell Seath, who would in turn tell Rhea. Not an outcome they are ready for. Still, Dmitri is correct. this could be an opportunity to regain Mercedes and Annette's friendship. Maybe you could try encouraging Mercedes and Annette to share whatever they make with the mercenaries? That way there is no risk being spotted by Flayn, but I could still speak with them. They were both very kind people, hopefully it wouldn't take much to strike up a friendly conversation. She still wasn't adept at that kind of thing. There is no shame in being worried you'll scare them off. It has happened often enough in your past that it is a reasonable anxiety. Byleth supposes. Dimitri lit up. That is a wonderful idea. You go back to your tent, and I will head straight towards the kitchens. Oh, that's such a thoughtful idea, Your Majesty. Mercedes was smiling serenely. I'm sure the mercenaries will love the pastries we are making today. Annette, meanwhile, looks uneasy. Are you sure, Merci? Have you seen them? They are all so scary looking. Flayn tilts her head to the side in confusion. I am not sure what their appearances have to do with enjoying good food. Oh. She clapped her hands together. I will unfortunately not be able to join you in delivering them. My brother needs me for something once we are done here. That's a shame, but I am sure Annie and I can handle it on our own. Mercedes turned back towards him. Thank you again for the suggestion, Your Majesty. Annette still looked apprehensive, so Dimitri walked over to her and put a hand on her shoulder. Please don't worry, I know most of the mercenaries now and they are all very nice. You've met Alois before, and Captain Geralt is a good man. I know, and I know the Blade Breaker used to be in the Knights of Syros, so he can't be a bad person. Annette shuddered. It's just the Ashen Demon, she's so unsettling. That is unfortunate. Annette used to love spending time with Byleth and now. Dimitri really had mucked everything up, by recruiting Geralt's mercenaries the way he had. Now Annie, she can't be all that bad, Mercedes chided. We just don't know her. Didu, Ingrid, Ash, His Majesty, and even Felix all enjoy her company. It is true. He has always been willing to take any excuse to spend time with his beloved. I often spar and take meals with Byleth. Annette looks at them thoughtfully. I guess if even Felix likes her, she can't be all that bad. Felix doesn't really like anybody. Not the response he would have hoped for, but Dimitri was willing to take what he could get. By the time Mercedes and Annette arrive with the baked treats, Byleth is using a whetstone on the sword her father gave her. Annette looked nervous, so she made a point of putting both items away. Do you need help with anything? Byleth stood up and walked over to them. Actually, we wanted to drop off these pastries for you and the other mercenaries to share. Mercedes showed her inside the box she was holding. Didn't we, Annie? Annette jumped at the mention of her name. Yes, that's why we came here. I can appreciate the boy's efficiency, but maybe he could have tried a method that did not leave the poor girl so jumpy. How can she ever want to be your friend if this is how she feels around you? To be fair to Dimitri, he probably thought Mercedes's presence and clear delight in the idea would keep Annette calm. I suppose. Byleth gestured behind her. Most of the others are over there, unfortunately not everyone is around right now. Where are they? Mercedes asked. Geralt and Alois took some of the others out for a training exercise, they should be back in a few hours. That wasn't completely true. Her father had wanted to look into possible escape routes on the chance they needed to leave in a hurry. They would be invading Inbar soon, and it seemed unlikely that Rhea wouldn't show up. Not that she'd told Dimitri about that yet. Byleth planned on doing so, but they hadn't shared a dream lately or been alone enough for her to feel comfortable telling him about it. If even one person accidentally overheard them, she didn't even want to contemplate the danger. Oh, that sounds exciting. How come you didn't go with them? Byleth shrugged. Felix wanted to spar with me and Didu invited me to lunch, so I didn't go. Mercedes smiled. That sounds lovely. She then shook her head. Silly me, I almost forgot. Mercedes stepped closer and offered Byleth the pastries. Here, please take as many as you'd like. I should probably go last. Byleth stepped out of the way, so they could go around her. If left unchecked, I'm liable to take too many. Really? Annette looked at her curiously. You don't look like you eat that much. Byleth snorted, startling the redhead. I can eat several servings of a meal and still have room for more. Please go around to the others first. Dimitri has mentioned what a good baker Mercedes is, and I would hate to risk taking someone else's portion. Mercedes eagerly made her way around their small campsite, but Annette hung back looking uncomfortable. You don't need to stay. Annette jumped again. What? If being around us makes you uneasy, you can leave. You shouldn't have to force yourself to be uncomfortable, Byleth assured her. We are used to people being afraid or mistrusting, so if you would prefer, you can go. Making the same offer worked out with Ash, and if it doesn't, Annette can still leave. That's not. I didn't mean, Annette sighed. Am I that obvious? Byleth nodded. Yes. Maybe that was too blunt. I know how the people of Faerghus view mercenaries, and I know what my reputation is. There is no shame in being wary. At least Annette looked guilty. That was better than her being set on being suspicious. Where did you get that sword? The mage gestured towards Byleth's tent. It looks familiar. That makes sense, it's the standard sword given to captains in the Knights of Syros. My father is a former captain, and he gave it to me. It was the first piece of his past he had given her this time around. The blade meant a lot to her, so she needed to keep it in good condition. That seemed to surprise Annette. Really, so your father passed it down to you? Are you close? I know you work together, but that doesn't always mean much. My father primarily uses lances, so he thought I could get more use out of it. It was such a good sword too, it had kept her safe on the battlefield more than once. And yes, we are close. We don't have a standard parent-child relationship, but I know he loves me, and I hope he knows how important I think he is. He'd lost so much because of her, his previous life and security, Eloise for a while, even her mother. Yet he never resented her for it and seemed to never regret running from Garreg Mach, despite how difficult it must have been. She knows her oddness had without a doubt not helped matters. Byleth was truly fortunate to have him as a father. Before Annette could say anything, Mercedes was back and shoving her basket at Byleth. Everyone else took some, the rest are yours, Miss Eisner. She turned to Annette, while Byleth looked in the basket. There are so many tasty-looking treats. She had missed Mercedes baking so much. Make sure to try the chocolate one. It looks good, and do not simply inhale them all. I wish to savor how they taste. Thank you for the pastries, they look delicious. Mercedes smiled at her. Oh, it was no trouble, I enjoyed making them. And you can eat all the remaining pastries, if your father and the others won't be back until later, they might not hold up too well. She then turned to her friend. Annie, did you enjoy your conversation with Miss Eisner? Suthies was correct, the chocolate one was really good. See. You should take my culinary advice more often. The other mercenaries were so nice when I was handing out the pastries. So appreciative and pleasant to chat with. Oh, are they? Mercedes nodded. Yes, I was surprised by how polite they were. Annette looked taken aback by that. Miss Eisner, Mercedes said while turning towards her. How are you enjoying the pastries? Byleth held the basket back out to Mercedes, who took it confusedly. They were delicious, thank you for sharing them with me. I told you, you were welcome to what was left. Mercedes looked in the basket and her eyes widened. There were at least 12 left, how did you? They were tasty, and I eat a lot. Annette looked back and forth between the empty basket and her. Whoa. She then let out a quick giggle. See, things weren't so bad. They both seem to like you well enough now. You don't need to call me Miss Eisner, just Byleth would be fine. Hey, do you have a minute? Byleth had just left the training grounds after sparring with Felix and Dimitri. I have some time. It had honestly surprised Byleth that it had taken Sylvain so long to approach her. You've held King Dimitri's attention since you got here, his tone was cold. Now the others are also chasing after you. I don't think I've ever seen Felix so eager to spar with the same person every day. Sylvain's eyes narrow. I don't think His Majesty's just watching you because he's suspicious either. You don't need to play around with your words, if you'd like you can just come out and say what you want. Byleth has never really had patience for politics. If you have a grievance, I would hear it. Sylvain actually smiles. You're straightforward, I can get behind that. His posture relaxes a bit. King Dmitri is not as sneaky as he thinks he is, I just want to know what your intentions are. So, Sylvain has figured out Dmitri's infatuation. Not really surprising given everything. It's just all my friends seem to like you now. Dida trusts you with Dmitri, Ash thinks you're a knight in all but name, I think you may be Ingrid's favorite dining partner, and Felix keeps raving about your skills with a blade. Sylvain takes a step closer to her. Recently Mercedes and Annette have been talking about how sweet you are, and like I said Dmitri is horrible about hiding his feelings. I just want to know what your angle is. His concerns are reasonable and given she knows how much Sylvain cares about his friends Byleth cannot fault him for questioning her. There is no angle, though given your nobility I understand that is likely difficult for you to believe. Sylvain has always been much smarter than he lets on, she will have to watch her words carefully. I will admit that Dmitri and I have a history, that I will not be discussing, and he wanted me and his friends to be amicable. I never expected them to come to genuinely like me. Given how things had been previously, Byleth had resigned herself to never being in their good graces again. Everything just seems to be coming so easy for you. This is recognizable, he'd thought her life was easy before as well. You don't appear to be struggling at all. For someone so smart, he was really off the mark there. Byleth cannot hold back a snort. My life has never been an easy one. You certainly have your own brand of hardships, everyone does, in my case it is just not easy to see. My whole life people have been wary of me because of my blank face. She hadn't made friends as a child because those her age would run from her. I've always disliked my moniker and it gives people a certain impression of me before we even meet. Names that contain the word demon rarely inspire warm and fuzzy feelings. While my struggles are not the same or even as obvious as yours, I still have them. I'm actually a little envious of you. You've always had people who cared about you. I only ever had my father, until I met Dmitri and he opened up a whole new world to me. Byleth took a step away from Sylvain. I'm not trying to trick or take advantage of anyone, I simply wish to know what it is like to have friends. You might wish to address his concerns about the boy's obvious infatuation. That would probably be for the best. And concerning King Dmitri's feelings, I have no intentions of becoming his mistress, and shocking as it might be to hear, I am not exactly ecstatic with the idea of being a queen. Sylvain shot her a smile before beginning to walk away. Thank you for being so forthright with me. He waves as he leaves. I think I understand what's going on a lot better now. Sorry if I was rude, but I wasn't sure if you would be honest with me otherwise. Well, that was certainly interesting. Chapter 39, Moving Forward. Dmitri was tackling his seemingly endless piles of paperwork. He'd had an enjoyable break sparring with Felix and Byleth, but he couldn't neglect work forever. His concentration was broken when he heard knocking. Hey, Your Majesty, do you have a minute? Sylvain was standing in his doorway. Dmitri cannot place the expression on his friend's face, but it put him on edge. There's something I'd like to discuss with you. Sylvain's smile widened. That is if you have a moment, of course. I can always spare some time for you. What could Sylvain wish to speak about? Sylvain entered Dmitri's makeshift office and sat down in one of the chairs. Well, I just had a very interesting conversation with a rather beautiful mercenary. Byleth. What did Sylvain say to her? I had no idea you'd confessed to such a beauty, I didn't know you had it in you. Sylvain slapped a hand on Dmitri's back. Congratulations. I feel like we should celebrate. Dmitri immediately got up and clamped a hand on Sylvain's mouth. Please stop, someone might hear you. The last thing he needs is for the wrong person to seriously suspect what's going on between him and Byleth. Things are at a very delicate stage right now, I'm trying to be careful. How was everyone figuring out his feelings for Byleth were not platonic? Sylvain shook himself out of Dmitri's grip. All right, but I still want to know how that happened. The Ashen Demon isn't your average woman, and she's probably one of the most attractive ladies I've seen lately. He sat back down again. We spoke and she doesn't seem too bad, I came at her pretty hard to see her reaction and she put me right in my place. You weren't rude to her, were you? Friends or not, Dmitri will not let anyone deliberately insult his beloved. No, I just wasn't particularly nice either, but she was polite enough and made her thoughts clear. I can see why you like her. The fact that she is gorgeous and could decimate all of us in the training grounds are just bonuses. Sylvain winked at him. How did you of all people get a mercenary's attention? Dimitri will have to check in with Byleth as soon as possible. She is bound to be annoyed about Sylvain approaching her and he needs to make sure she is okay. I do not know how things really happened. It was a gradual thing that began as far back as the day we met. Telling her how I feel has become very easy. Saying I love you to his beloved is a rather simple thing now. The real problem has been showing her in a way that does not inadvertently backfire. From what I can gather, the two of you are not together despite all that. You should go for it. If she can get even Felix to relax, she must be amazing. Sylvain laughed. How did the two of you meet anyway? It couldn't have been when we recruited her and the other mercenaries. Whatever lies between the two of you has obviously been going on for a while. He looked up thoughtfully. Looking back, it does explain a few things. Byleth and I met while we were in the officers' academy. What he told Didu about Byleth should also suffice here. Since then, we've maintained a correspondence and she was assisting me while she was with the Imperial Army. Before Sylvain could comment on that, Dimitri hurriedly continued, and no, I will not elaborate on that. Dimitri doesn't know how he could even begin to explain why she was spying for him. While I would love nothing more than to go for it as you suggest, I cannot do so right now. While things have been improving, Byleth does not wish for us to be a couple. Given how oblivious he was to her hardships, Dimitri can better understand where she is coming from. She is worried about our compatibility and differing lifestyles. Persistence has not done him too many favors, instead it had inadvertently caused her turmoil. Byleth knows how I feel and what I ultimately want for us. For now that is enough. Dimitri relaxed in his chair. We've made compromises on trying, but I know she would never be happy as a queen. So, your issue is that what would make the two of you happy don't exactly line up, right? What is Sylvain getting at? That is one of them, yes. The simplest way to try and get around that is to find out what her ideal life would be like and go from there. If you aren't compatible, then you don't stay together, but even if it is short-lived, you can still enjoy each other's company. Dimitri isn't so sure about that. Could he ever be okay with walking away from Byleth, even if he does come to agree with her? If you can be compatible as a couple, then you find ways to compromise so you can both be happy. Sylvain put a hand on Dimitri's shoulder. I know you need to eventually get married, but I hope that it can be with someone who makes you happy. If this is how you do that, then try to be smart about it. Byleth had told him something similar once. If you think her concerns are accurate, then take them seriously and work on trying to overcome them. Sylvain shrugged. Even if you don't think they're accurate, you should probably take them seriously. Thank you, my friend. I hope your future spouse will make you happy as well. Dimitri has already been working on overcoming some of their issues, putting most of his attention on helping Byleth regain some of her lost friendships. He hasn't put much effort elsewhere, in the admittedly short time they've been back. He is going to need to figure out a few things soon though. Byleth is not going to be in his army forever, and they need to figure out what to do when she leaves. They should at least begin to address Byleth's concerns about how they've changed. If they don't, their impending separation would likely exacerbate the issue. Besides, Sylvain says with a grin, if you don't do something I just might. Few men could pass up on a beauty such as hers. Dimitri has to suppress the urge to throw Sylvain into the lake. Byleth is beginning to feel uneasy in camp again. It is not because of her former students this time though. She cannot quite place it, but there is apprehension in the air. It is difficult to even relax while fishing. There's not even anyone else around to make noise or anything. Perhaps it is the rumors going around about a visit from the church. Suthies suggested. With our invasion of Inbar on the horizon, it would not be surprising for Rhea to come. Maybe, but they should receive a warning if something like that were to happen. If Byleth is feeling the tension, then her father should be as well. It is probably only a matter of time until he wants them to leave. Their contract with Dimitri does not have a set ending time, so something will have to be worked out, but she knows Dimitri will not force them to stay. Especially since he's aware of what they are hiding from. Byleth, Suthisa's voice is uneasy. If our suspicions are correct, and the Archbishop is trying to have me replace you, and is possibly truly my daughter, do you think she would try and force the issue were she to see you? It's possible. If that is her intent, she did try and trick me into giving you my body once. It is rather terrifying looking back. Rhea had been so excited when Byleth was about to sit on the throne and was disappointed when nothing happened. She doesn't even know me this time around, who's to say she'd care about me as an individual person, or even see me as one? It is entirely possible Rhea just sees her as an extension of Suthies and always had. Byleth has no idea. The fact I have no ties to her or Garreg Mach would make things difficult for her. Archbishop or not, she cannot grab seemingly random people off the street and drag them off, never to be seen again. That is true. She could throw her weight around to make it look acceptable to some, but to many it would look exactly like it is. It would be a kidnapping, plain and simple. She could try and spin a story, but depending on how publicly she tries to take you and how vocal you are about not wanting to go, that will not be very effective. It is still a daunting prospect. It may not feel like much, but all we can do is keep our eyes open and caution the boy to do the same. Unsurprisingly, it does not take Dimitri long to find her. It never does. Beloved, we need to talk about something important. He walks over and sits next to her. I've been avoiding thinking about it, but you will not be here forever. When you leave and find work elsewhere, we need to figure out a way to remain in contact. He places one of his hands over hers. I fear if we don't, our issues will only grow worse. We haven't even begun to try and alleviate your worries about our compatibility. Truthfully, Byleth hadn't put much thought into it either. They had both been focused on other things. It won't be easy, but there are some things that would allow us to communicate after I leave, as we've discussed before. She takes her hand out of his. For one, we are still sharing dreams, so we can talk when that happens. We could also write to each other. The second one was admittedly not ideal. It will be complicated though. I can just send my letters to Ferdiad or wherever I hear you happen to be. She is sure to hear news on the road if the King of Faerghus has gone somewhere. Getting letters to me would be tricky since I won't be staying in one place for very long. At least not regularly. It's not an ideal solution, but Byleth doesn't see a better way to go about things. Dimitri looks similarly disappointed. I'm inclined to agree, though I wish we could come up with a better plan. Our shared memory dreams have significantly decreased in number, and I would prefer not to have to ask Suthies to allow us to use the throne room just so we can catch up. That does seem like an imposition. I do not mind lending you both a hand in these matters. It still seems like a bit much to constantly ask for it. It won't be too bad. Byleth really isn't good at optimism. If things hadn't changed, we wouldn't have seen a lot of each on a regular basis anyway. You were king of all Fodlan, and I was in Garreg Mach. Byleth shrugged. This isn't too different from that if you think about it. Dimitri leaned against her side. I wish things were simpler between us. I am trying to take your concerns seriously, but a large part of me wants to just take you home and be done with all this. Before she can respond, Dimitri continues. I know that is selfish and that you would be unhappy in my castle and that doing so would cause more problems than it would solve, but he then lowered his face into his hands. Byleth carefully put her fishing rod down and wrapped an arm around Dimitri's shoulders. She still wasn't sure if them being a couple was a good idea, but he was so upset. She couldn't just sit here and do nothing. I know and I appreciate how difficult this must be for you. We still have a lot of things to work though, but keep in mind that you were not idle during this march. On top of your regular duties around camp, you gave me a great gift. She nudged his side. You gave me some of my friends back. It will never be like it was before, but I'm not as alone as I used to be. You worked hard to get us this far and that is something to be proud of. Sure, we still have a long way to go, but at the same time important steps have already been taken. Dimitri has an unfortunate tendency to always see the worst in himself. Of always believing he wasn't doing enough. He does so much though, Byleth just wishes he could see that. Thank you Byleth. Dimitri straightened his posture, and she took her arm off his shoulders. Sylvain gave me a piece of advice recently that I would like to try if you don't mind. Advice from Sylvain, huh? This would either be brilliant or some kind of trick. It could go either way when Sylvain was involved. Really? I was under the impression that he didn't like me much. Actually, he has a favorable opinion of you. I apologize for whatever it was he said to you, but he told me that he was trying to get a rise out of you to get a more accurate read on your intentions. Dmitri sighed. I really wish he hadn't done that, but given how the situation must look from an outsider's perspective, I cannot say I fault him for being worried about me. It's fine, don't worry about it. Sylvain had said worse things to her when she was still his professor. So, what was the advice? Dmitri looked up at the sky. One of the problems we are currently facing is that our lifestyles do not match up. You would not be happy living in my castle as my queen, and I could never abandon my responsibilities. Sylvain recommended that I find out what you would consider a good life. From there, once we find out if we both agree we are still compatible, we find a compromise that works for both of us. Dmitri rubbed the back of his neck. There are a lot of uncertainties, but I believe the suggestion to be sound. It seemed reasonable to Byleth as well. In light of that, please tell me what you would like out of life. Dmitri's voice was soft. I have an idea, but I think it would be best if I heard it straight from you. How could one question be so simple, yet so complicated? I don't think there is anything specific, but I don't like being in one place for too long. Even after all that time in Garreg Mach, it never felt like home to me. In her mind she had spent about 2 years living there, the longest she could ever remember staying in one place, and it eventually began to feel like a prison. I can see the merits of having a place to continuously go back to, and don't mind the thought of it, but I don't think staying in one place for years at a time is for me. Her whole life had been spent traveling with her father after all. I honestly have simple needs. I want to travel, eat good food, and keep my skills sharp. I understand that you have a sense of duty and responsibilities you not only feel you need to satisfy but enjoy fulfilling. Byleth sighed. I'm not like that. All those responsibilities and requirements, I chafe under them. I like helping people, but after getting a taste of what you do during my short time as Archbishop, I don't think I would wish such a life on my worst enemy. She respects that Dmitri feels obligated to be king and all that comes with it, and while she knows he loves helping his subjects, she also knows how stressed out it makes him. Dmitri's life is not an easy one, and she is simply not suited for it. He is not surprised by what Byleth's answer was. Dmitri has always known that his beloved had simple needs, but he wishes their future together was less uncertain because of it. Thank you for your honesty. He cautiously reaches for one of her hands. Suppose for a moment that through exchanging letters and sharing dreams we both conclude that we could last as a couple. Do you have any thoughts on what potential compromises we could come to? Was that too pushy? We could always change our minds later, of course, but I'd like something to look back on while formulating future plans. No, that's reasonable. Byleth places a hand under her chin. I do have one thought, though it will take a lot of time. And by a lot of time, I mean decades. That is longer than he would like. Could he really afford to be picky though? They did not have many options as it was, and if he pushed too hard and became too greedy when it came to Byleth, he could very well lose everything. I don't like it, but I do not have any suggestions. Dmitri clenched his fist. This was the love of his life, the only woman he could even fathom being with. Why must everything be so complicated? They can't even exchange letters easily. What is your idea? He picks up a nearby rock and examines it. Byleth looked at him in concern before she started talking again. I do not believe either of us could be happy together in the short term given the sacrifices that would be required. With that in mind, it might be best to simply wait until you can step down from your position. She looked away from him. As I said, it would probably take decades, but eventually you would be able to choose a successor or even abolish the monarchy altogether. Dmitri does not like how long all of that would take, but it does seem like a reasonable path. Still, would he be able to stand being away from his beloved for so long? What about their differing lifespans? In this scenario, by the time they could potentially be together he would be much older than Byleth. There were so many things to consider. And where could I find this hypothetical successor? Why is that the first thing out of his mouth? Well, the way I'm sure your advisors would like you to get one is by marrying and having children, said Byleth. Dmitri crushes the rock in his hand. Byleth doesn't even react. But there are other ways to go about it. Choosing a child from a suitable noble family as your successor if you do not have children should be enough. If that cannot work, I'm sure you have a cousin or two out there, given the rumors about your uncle. I suppose adoption might also be an option. Any of those routes could work, it would take some doing though. A king never marrying or having children wasn't exactly common. I know it is off topic, but speaking of children, have you ever considered having any? Dmitri has always longed to have a family, but outside of his time training orphans at the officers' academy he doesn't have any experience with children. He has no idea if he would be a decent father or if he even truly likes children beyond the concept of them. It would be nice though, to one day raise a child who's a little of him and a little of Byleth. Regardless of my station, I feel this is a conversation all couples should have. I agree with you, we shouldn't avoid these kinds of topics, Byleth says quietly. She likely understands he needs a brief distraction. I'm not sure if I ever want to be a mother. Mine died having me, and I don't have a functioning heart. My body isn't normal, even with Suthies there is every chance having a child would also be a death sentence for me. I've been told my mother was sickly and never left Garagmok because of it, so that likely had something to do with her frailty while in labor, but the risk is still there for me. Dmitri hadn't considered that. His own mother died not too long after he was born. Would that be Byleth's fate should they decide to have a child together? Part of him is certain that Suthi's presence will be of help to Byleth, but as his beloved pointed out, her body is not normal. Ignoring that though, I don't have the best experiences with children. They are loud and tend to run at the sight of me. I'm not sure I have the right temperament to deal with small children and my impassive face scares them. Byleth shrugs. What about you? Part of me wants children, but at the same time I am not sure if I know enough about myself to really make that kind of decision. I grew up knowing that I would eventually have to have at least one child, so I never put much thought into it. Getting his advisors and even his friends to not push him into it would prove challenging. I do not have much experience with children in general. I've met some of course, but I haven't spent a significant amount of time with any of them. Byleth nods. I think the best course of action would be that should we decide to be together, children should be off the table, at least for a time. Things will be hectic enough without further complications being added. We can always re-evaluate things later. That seems like a good idea. I am inclined to agree with you. He wants to have everything with Byleth, but they must be responsible about this. If they should have a child, he wants it to have a good life, and that includes parents who want to be parents and are prepared for the job. Additionally, if they go with their current plan they will be separated for long stretches of time. If he and Byleth ever do decide to have a child, he doesn't want to miss anything. Back to our original discussion, how would we handle the decades apart and what would come next? We could still see each other, it is well known that we are acquainted. You could hire us as many times as you want, and like that time in Leicester, we could always plan to meet up on occasion, Byleth responded. As for after, we could do whatever we wanted. For the first few years or so it would probably be for the best if we made ourselves scarce for a while, maybe even leave Fodlan, to avoid you being recognized. Dmitri has always thought the way Byleth lived was fascinating. He would not mind traveling everywhere and seeing everything, and if he found he wasn't as suited to the lifestyle as his beloved, they could probably find somewhere more stable to live. What about our lifespans? None of this will really matter if you look as you do now when I am in my 40s or older. They might look like parent and child, not husband and wife. Byleth looked off to the side and mumbled something he couldn't make out. She was likely talking with Suthies. There is something. I brought it up briefly, but not in detail because neither Suthies nor I have the knowledge to make it work, but I suppose it bears brining up regardless. Byleth takes a deep breath. There is an old Nabatean mating ritual we could make use of. Its original purpose was to bind two Nabateans' lives together. Eventually humans were included in this too. The Nabatean would give their human mate a crest so they could participate in the ritual. Dmitri does remember her mentioning it before, and like a fool he insisted they do it immediately. Thinking about it now though, it does sound too good to be true. I am sorry, but I already have a crest. Why would we not be able to do this ritual? Because, Byleth began, all Nabateans had major crests, as they were their originators. If a human gets a crest directly from a Nabatean, they also get a major crest. And I have a minor crest. Dimitri knew this was too good to be true. Byleth nodded. We do not know if the ritual will work with a minor crest, and I'd prefer not to experiment since we don't know what the consequences could be. I suppose we will just have to find ways to do further research. Linhard liked researching crests, perhaps Dimitri could find a way to enlist his help. They did have decades after all. But how long did they still have together? Do you know how long we have until you leave? No. I don't know yet, but it's only a matter of time. Byleth cast him a worried look. Are you going to be okay? Dimitri wasn't sure. As long as we stay in touch and both take our relationship seriously, I can weather any storm. If at the end of all this, there is a chance he and Byleth can not only be together again, but also be happy, he is willing to wait as long as it takes. His beloved is worth any hardship. Chapter 40, Running and Hiding. The happy bubble Dimitri was in popped as soon as he found out the Archbishop was on her way. As they near Inver, Dimitri can tell that Geralt is getting anxious, not that he can blame the man. When he received word that the Archbishop intended to join them during their invasion of Inver, he had gone straight to the mercenary captain to tell him the news. It only made sense that Captain Geralt would be tense, his daughter might be in danger after all. Dimitri kept assuring the man that the Archbishop wouldn't be allowed near Byleth, but considering such assurances were not assuaging Dimitri's own anxieties, it was unsurprising they didn't help Geralt either. The timing of it all was such a shame. Byleth was finally on good terms with all the former Blue Lions again, and he'd even seen some of the others spending time with her lately. The other morning, Bernadetta was using his beloved as a shield of sorts, allowing herself to stay out of sight while going somewhere. He's also seen Felix, Raphael, and Byleth returning from a short hunting trip. They had managed to get a lot of meat, and everyone had eaten well. Now it looked like she would have to leave soon. Dimitri knows it's the right move to make. Byleth's safety is more important than his desire to keep her close. They don't know for certain what Lady Rhea wants from Byleth, but if she and Suthies are even partially correct in their theory, then his beloved needs to stay away. They'd barely even begun working on their relationship. Sure, Byleth hadn't avoided his presence at every opportunity, but that was as far as they had progressed. Dimitri knows that he still loves Byleth, but she was still so uncertain. They cannot move in any definite direction until Byleth knows whether she still loves him or not. Dimitri is certain that he can win her affections again, but with everything that was going on they couldn't focus on them. However, he does not regret pouring all his spare energy into helping Byleth regain some of what she once lost. He just wishes they had more time. Dimitri felt a hand land on his shoulder and squeeze. Hey, kid, we need to have a chat. Geralt had a stern look on his face. I appreciate all that you've done for us. I don't know what happened in Fhirdiad, but Byleth has been doing much better lately. I've seen her open up in ways she never has before. Geralt sighed. I'd prefer to not have to do this, but I think we need to leave soon. It's only a matter of time until the Archbishop gets here. There are already more people from the church sniffing around. We got lucky last time, I'm not willing to bet that it will happen again. Dimitri put down the lance he had been polishing. I understand. While your absence will be a hit to my forces, I would never dream of holding you here. Curse Lady Rhea, why does she need to come now? We specifically did not have a planned ending date for our contract for just this eventuality. He'll have to take as much time with Byleth as he can until she leaves. The battles were winding down, but surely there is something they can do. Thanks, there's another squeeze, I appreciate it. We'll be gone by the end of the week. That should be before we get to Inver, and you can of course utilize my men until that happens. Maybe he could tempt Byleth with an expedition. That should also give him at least a couple more fishing lessons. Dimitri has thoroughly enjoyed not only the lessons, but Captain Geralt's company. I hope your avoidance of the church will not prevent you from taking future jobs from me in the future. That might be the only way for Dimitri to seek out Byleth. Of course not, Geralt laughed. You pay well and are good to my daughter and the rest of us. We'll take your coin anytime. At least he and Byleth wouldn't have to sneak around to see each other. Byleth is walking to her daily sparring match with Felix when she nearly runs into Mercedes. "Oh, I am so sorry Byleth," Mercedes apologized as Byleth moved to the side. "I wasn't watching where I was going." "It's okay, no harm was done." Byleth hopes Felix will not be upset with her for being late. She is leaving in just a few days, and he was adamant that they get in as much sparring as possible until then. "If you don't mind, I need to be going." Mercedes smiles at her. "There's no need to wait on my account. I'm in a rush myself. I just heard the news that Lady Rhea is coming, she should be here any day no." She bounced on her feet slightly. "I need to get a few things ready before she gets here." "What? Why is she getting here so soon? We are not even at Inver yet. Why is the Archbishop coming so early?" Byleth hopes her voice sounds steady. "There is still some time before Inver is even in sight. The Archbishop apparently wants to help more in the war efforts." Mercedes shrugged. "She was reportedly very excited to come to our camp." The priestess suddenly gasps. "That's not even the most interesting part. Lady Rhea is also bringing the Sword of the Creator, though no one seems to know why. No one ever gets to see it, so I can't begin to imagine why it would be brought here, but it must be for something important, don't you think?" "Oh no, she knows about you." "But how could?" "The how matters not, what is important is what's happening." Suthies interrupted. "Get moving and do something. Do not just stand there like a fool." "You are correct, that is interesting. Byleth needs to find Dimitri. He's sure to know what's going on. Thank you for sharing that with me, but I really must be going. Have a good day." Mercedes waved her off as Byleth walked away. They were so close to being gone. Why did this have to happen now? Byleth finds Dimitri anxiously pacing in his tent. "Mercedes just told me about Rhea." There was no time for pleasantries. Dimitri paused in his pacing to glance at her. "I just found out myself." "What are we going to do?" "We cannot let her see you, she'll know immediately who you are. The fact she's bringing the Sword of the Creator can only mean she already knows about you. I need to leave." There was no other option. If Rhea sees her, there will be consequences. She would likely demand to take you, Dimitri would deny her, and then this war would get much more complicated. Byleth is also worried about what could come after. Should Rhea force her on the throne, nothing would happen. Rhea could turn into a dragon, who's to say she wouldn't lose her temper after her decades-long plan failed and do something drastic? A worrying thought indeed. She isn't used to feeling this kind of fear. Leaving before would be for the best, but we will have to be careful about it, Dimitri cautioned. Only a handful of people know what kind of danger you are in. If anyone suspects that you are fleeing, it will attract unwanted attention. That isn't even the only danger. It's also not a simple matter of leaving quietly. If Rhea is coming specifically for me, she could very well decide to chase us after we left." That was a good point. Given how fixated he remembers Lady Rhea being, Dimitri can easily imagine her sending someone after them. Or more likely, going herself. Perhaps Geralt and the rest of the mercenaries could leave separately from you. You could hide in my tent, a place the Archbishop had no business approaching, while everyone else left. It would be difficult to not linger, but Dimitri is sure he could manage. You could leave the following morning and meet up with your father at a predetermined location. If their ruse is suspected, it will likely be assumed that Byleth would leave before Lady Rhea's arrival. This way, if Lady Rhea sends someone after your father and the other mercenaries, they will not find you among them or on the road at all. For the rest of the day, they should act as normal, and hopefully that will be enough to throw Rhea off. The only issue is that we will have to act quickly. The Archbishop is expected to arrive tomorrow. That doesn't give them a lot of time, especially since their movements will have to be precise. I'll go meet up with Felix for our spar, hopefully I won't be too late. Dimitri nodded. They shouldn't deviate from their usual patterns. I'll go meet your father for my usual fishing lesson and update him on our thoughts. He just hopes his beloved's father does not object to their plan. I can't say I like the idea you and my kid came up with, Geralt said as he cast his line into the water. However, I also cannot think of a better one. Relief courses through Dmitri. He'd been worried that Captain Geralt might outright reject the proposal. I know it is not ideal, but it's the best we could come up with in the short time we had. It wasn't without risk, but he doubts any plan would be. I figured. Geralt glances over at him. I don't know how much you know about my and Byleth's situation, but I suspect you're aware of quite a bit. I won't ask though, plausible deniability and all that. He is likely to ask Byleth though, Dmitri will have to warn her. As far as Captain Geralt knows, his daughter doesn't know about the circumstances surrounding her birth. I need you to promise me something though, kid. I need you to take good care of my daughter for the one day you're hiding her. Dmitri eagerly nods. Of course, sir. I swear that no harm will befall her. He would never let anyone hurt his beloved. Though the fact that her father trusted him with Byleth's safety made him very happy. No one will even know she is still here. When Byleth arrives at Dimitri's tent, he looks to be hastily cleaning up, going back and forth, moving things around and putting others away. Is everything all right? Dmitri literally jumps. Yes, everything is fine. He relaxes slightly when he turns to look at her. Were you able to get here without being spotted? I believe so. Multiple people besides those in my company saw me enter my tent and I kept to the shadows as I walked here. Between her and Suthies they would have noticed anyone who was nearby. Dmitri nods and then gestures towards the bed. That is good, you can take the bed for the night. In response, Byleth takes her bedroll out of her pack. Thank you, but I will be fine. Byleth. That is literally your bed, Dmitri. I have no issues with sleeping on my bedroll. I do it almost every night. Byleth appreciates him being considerate, but it is unnecessary. Since she can see the protest coming, Byleth hastily makes herself comfortable. Please do not worry yourself. Begrudgingly, Dmitri gets into his own bed and blows out the candle that had been illuminating his tent. Is your father ready to depart early in the morning? Yes, Byleth answers. He's going to wait until the cooks are supposed to begin making breakfast. That way a few people will be awake to see him and the others leave. That is good. By the time Lady Rhea gets here in the afternoon they should be long gone and everyone in camp will know it. He sits up to get a better look at her. I promise to leave you books and other things to keep you occupied. That will be nice. Being cooped up in Dimitri's tent all day with nothing to do would be boring. Thank you. Even in the dark, Dimitri's blush is visible. I'd like to say I'll visit as much as possible, but that would draw attention, so I probably shouldn't. That is probably for the best. I know you and your father likely have everything figured out, but could you tell me where you're planning on meeting them when you do leave? I'd prefer not to tell you. Part of her is honestly worried that he'll follow her. I don't want to put you in a position where you might have to lie. If someone asks if you know where I am afterwards, you can honestly say you don't know. I suppose that makes sense. Dmitri hesitates. It's just that I am very worried about you. What if, despite our efforts, you are discovered or followed? I could not bear it if someone dragged you to the Archbishop so she could do whatever her plans are. Byleth could understand that. She was worried about it too. If that does happen, we'll just have to think on our feet. Hopefully that will be enough. Welcome, Lady Rhea. I hope there were no issues during your journey. Dmitri offers a hand as the Archbishop exits her carriage. It was quiet, thank you. Lady Rhea took in their surroundings before turning back to him. How are the battle preparations coming along? Straight to the point then. They are coming along well. We should be ready to invade Inbar in a matter of days. His beloved had even helped him come up with a few different battle plans that they could potentially use. Lady Rhea bowed her head. That is good. Through the guidance of the goddess will we have a swift victory. That would be nice. Dmitri was looking forward to the war finally ending. Though he is well aware that Suthies has no control over such things. It really is rather odd to be talking with the devout Archbishop, when he is on speaking terms with the goddess she worships. A word if I may, King Dmitri, requested Lady Rhea. Is there a problem? The last thing he needs is for her to be agitated. The calmer things were, the safer Byleth was. The Archbishop shook her head. I have been considering one of our discussions at Garreg Mach. The one about what to do about the Emperor, she clarified. I would like to ascertain Edelgard's mental state before deciding what should be done with her. After you brought up her possible situation, I looked into it and there are many reports supporting your claim that something has been done to her mind. Dmitri cannot help but feel relieved, as he has had similar thoughts. He is not sure what to think of his stepsister, but Byleth was right. Edelgard would have preferred death to what had really happened to her. Dmitri's not sure he could bring himself to kill her again, but surely they could figure something out. Perhaps there will be an opportunity to guide her back to the goddess. Dmitri is not sure if Edelgard would have appreciated such sentiments at any point in her life. Things are quiet as Dmitri leads Lady Rhea to where her temporary lodgings would be set up. He makes sure to point out where things like the kitchen and baths are. It isn't until they get there that she speaks again. I've noticed that the mercenary band you hired are no longer here. How could she know that? They hadn't gone anywhere near where their tents had been. Did something happen? Perhaps you sent them out on an assignment before the upcoming battle. The battle tactics I was informed of ahead of time did not include them either. Dmitri can feel his blood run cold. Actually, Geralt's mercenaries left early this morning. Dmitri needed to remain calm. If he appeared casual and unconcerned, she shouldn't suspect anything from him. They wanted to leave. I can only assume they have other job offers elsewhere. Perhaps they did not wish to be part of an invasion. Dmitri forced a smile. I would very much like to hire them again in the future and our contract was technically up. If I denied them this, they would be unlikely to accept my coin again. A dark look briefly crosses Lady Rhea's face, and if Dmitri didn't know better, he probably would have thought he imagined it. That is a shame. I had been looking forward to seeing Geralt again, it has been so long after all. Dmitri hastily nods. Yes, a shame. Apologies, but I really should be going now. You must need rest after your journey, and I have to continue to get things ready for Inver. Of course, Your Majesty. Thank you for your consideration. Dmitri walks off, and when he is some distance away, he chances a glance back. Lady Rhea is speaking with one of her attendants. That wouldn't be too out of the ordinary, if the Archbishop didn't look so agitated. An hour later, Dmitri is informed that several of Lady Rhea's men were spotted leaving the camp. They were all headed in the direction that Geralt's mercenaries rode off in. Dmitri isn't sure if he should be pleased the plan is working or upset that they were correct about the risks involving Lady Rhea. Was this it? Would he forever have to help hide his beloved from the church in fear that the Archbishop would try and do her harm? It is understandable for now, but Dmitri is not sure it is sustainable. Not only does he wish to not hide Byleth and their potential relationship from everyone, but he would prefer to take care of any threats, not flee or hide from them. To do that, he might eventually have to follow Claude's sentiments and cut ties with the church, which would not be ideal either. It might help keep Byleth safe, but it would have immeasurable consequences for those living in Faerghus. His subjects deserved better than a selfish king, and Byleth herself would not want him to put her above so many others. He just wishes the right answer was clearer. They cannot do this indefinitely. Sooner or later, they are going to have to confront Rhea. Byleth wants to know exactly what happened when she was born, and if Rhea really was Ciro's, really was Suthi's daughter, they couldn't avoid her forever. Part of me agrees, but I am also afraid. If she really is my daughter, how could I possibly confront her about everything? Even if she isn't Ciro's, I don't want to hear that the Archbishop of the religion devoted to me wanted to sacrifice someone so I could use their body as a meat suit. Suthi's was trembling, in fear or rage or sadness. Byleth wasn't sure. The fact I adore you is irrelevant. To think someone would believe I would find the sacrifice of a child acceptable. I understand, but you kept telling me that running from my problems with Dmitri and the others was a bad idea. How is this any different? Byleth hated seeing her friend so upset. If confronting Rhea would help you move on, maybe we should consider it. And if the Archbishop uses such an event as a chance to take you? Byleth had to repress a shudder. If that does happen, it's not like her plan, which we are still not certain of, would be successful. Suthi's has no desire to take Byleth's body after all. We could find a way to see Rhea on our own terms, surprise her somehow, so she can't order people around us to grab me. I suppose. Just think about it. Before they could continue, Dmitri came in carrying a tray of food. I told everyone I would be eating lunch in my tent, so I can sort through some reports. That would explain the stack of papers in the corner. I thought we could share the food, Dmitri said with a smile. It won't be the most filling if we share, but it is better than skipping a meal. There was sense in that, and at least Dmitri gave a legitimate reason for coming to see her. Do you want help with the reports? If Byleth is going to be here, she may as well make herself useful. Check the description for the links to the author.